2 weeks. Just 2 weeks were given to make the best decision of our life. Who am I? That car ride would be like no other, going 110% the speed limit, weaving through the neon orange roadblocks, dodging the impatient cars whose lane came to an abrupt stop, while hard rock blared, trying to drown out the lump in your throat. 7 games, 2 months. It had been weeks since you last played a game, told countless times not to let it affect you, to stay in it. But you couldn't see past the pitiful stares, secretly grateful of the opportunity earned over you. It's hard not to remember the hours spent praying, begging for the opportunity to be a professional, and waking up the next morning, beyond ecstatic, to lace up the cold, worn laces biting into the sides of your palm. I had wondered what he would say if he could see the state that you are in, whether he would be proud that you made it, or ashamed you couldn't see past yourself in realizing you do belong. But as the construction zone ended, and the sight of the arena, where our ride to end a long, extraneous season waited, a buzz snagged your attention, as if it had rung differently, urging you to quench the curiosity it aroused. Was one more law broken anyways? No way, I said, as if somebody could hear you, and validate the surreal atmosphere as time slowed to a hold at 80 kilometers an hour. The immediate phone call to my mom and dad served to ensure this was actually happening. I remember the western blue mountains blurring together, as I heard my parents crying at the news. What a surreal feeling it was. Tears from anger and frustration were expressed as unwavering joy and happiness. It was hard to wipe the emotion from my face as the gravel-filled parking lot and the smell of frozen exhaust came into distance. For a man known for his inability to lie, it was a tall task to try and pretend I hadn't secured my future as a neuroscientist opposed to a hockey player. Unbeknownst to you, though, this was no easy resolution. It was impossible not to be blinded by the idea of scholarship. After all, as you had grown, and the topic of what the end goal of athletics was had usually fallen down to a rationalized answer of university or college. But as the thought slowed down, and the dust had settled, there remained the toughest decision you could imagine at the time, and a big, gaping question that needed to be answered. Your life had been praised of the athlete you are, the awards for your work ethic, and the countless times you had beaten the odds and told of your limitless potential. What if the pursuit of school was an excuse? For the first time you had a reasonable doubt this would be the first insurmountable wall to the next level. To be fair, you were 18, watching your very own team lose their 7th game in a row, as you watched, healthy but helpless, and as players younger than you and I danced around the ice, taunting the freedom and trust they were given. Despite this, though, what else did you know? Besides God, hockey had been the entirety of your identity, and leaving it would be an abandonment of who you are. The objections piled up in your mind, and it became impossible to find clarity through the facades and smoke hiding the purpose you had so desperately needed to know. In the end, you couldn't be a hockey player forever, and you knew that. Fear and uncertainty was something you had met a lot, but never in this manner. Hockey was never clear, but it was peaceful. A life lived so basic, it was so easy to enjoy. Eat, sleep, train, and practice. It was so simple, and you had grown so good at it. No amount of prayer or advice would satisfy the deep-seated desire to know what it was on the other side of this decision. Every single person we knew got a say in who you are and what you are to become. But in the end, none of their advice mattered, when the reflection in the mirror relayed an ambiguous figure. How nice it would be to live the next few years in security, with the place to play hockey for at least 2, and hopefully the opportunity to wind up at a university after that. But waiting isn't exactly in our forte, and the prospect of waiting 2 years to wind up in the exact same spot was daunting. If it weren't for hockey, the last 2 weeks would have driven you mad. For the first time in what must have been eternity, it felt like you were finally arriving at the rink with little autonomy. And finally, some good news. Previously, it had seemed like it would never come around. It was almost ironic, the way life balanced death and new beginnings so beautifully. Death was not a topic you were familiar with, and with the family member passing just a few days prior, it was terrifying to relinquish the beloved Bella, the beautiful, wrinkly fur coat that had always driven you crazy when the neighborhood squirrel sat outside the window. But death does not wait for peace, and as the lineup was posted for the weekend, your name was absent once again. and the clock striking 2 in the afternoon, signifying the euthanization of our childhood pet. It was impossible to remain focused on the practice at hand. So you left, got undressed, and drove home. It felt like no one cared anyways. You hadn't played in 2 months and weren't playing this weekend. What purpose was left in playing? What was left in pursuing a goal that didn't seem like I was even permitted to achieve? To run away felt so liberating. Southbound and down, you drove, unsure where you were going, but you ended up at Bella's favorite park. And so you walked, like she was still there. The humming of the streetlights as dusk had approached, the fading light being swallowed up by the mountain range. Seldom was I confident enough to make a decision, so defiant against my coaches and my mentors. Yet the supportive messages from them resonated the approval I needed that I had made the right choice to leave. And in the dark, invisible to the world, would you finally come to terms with what you had actually run from? You started to resent the scholarship. Life would have been so easy hadn't I just continued down the same endless path I had followed. But there was no running, no ignorance left, no time left to put your head down and work. The deadline was approaching fast, and in that, hockey wasn't so important anymore. And as the silence in the park lay eager to hear your thoughts, the rumination of the deaths of those around you had set in. Hockey was not a be-all, end-all. As a full-length hockey career, lasting until one's mid-30s, wouldn't even reach half of the average lifespan. And in that realization, the power of a second option had dawned upon you. The ones we remember, the individuals who left a lasting remark on the person I am writing this letter to, were not the greatest hockey players. They are the ones who had accepted you. The ones who waited as long as it took for you to push past or stutter and complete the sentence and respond with a thoughtful, curated response. And somewhere in that park, with the ghost of Bella and my aunt watching over me, was a realization of the purpose you were to fulfill. To be an amazing athlete is all I could have ever dreamt of, playing in front of hundreds of thousands, all looking down on me with approval and awe. And unbeknownst to you, standing in that park, that the decision you have dreaded for so long had been made since you were a 3-year-old boy, who first put on his skates and cried out how bad they hurt. Over the past 15 years, as you grew and aged and played sports all the way through your adolescent years, the fondest memories that you were oh so proud of were the times you had made strangers smile, and the times you had invited your classmate to come play soccer with you so he wouldn't feel alone at recess. You were never a hockey player, but a man who cared deeply about the profound effect that he could have on others. So from that realization, you drove home and journaled about the purpose of what you believe you were put on this earth for. Not to be rich or famous or the best to ever touch the ice, but to be the physician who listened thoughtfully and carefully in ensuring the patient was truly understood. And so they would go home joyful and that somebody cared for their well-being. To be the man who never dismissed what a young child had to say, regardless of the coherence of their thoughts. Hockey was not your purpose. And so I made the decision. 4 days before the deadline, and 6 days until playoffs, I had signed away the last of my hockey career, solidifying our playoff run as a final goodbye to a chapter of my life well lived, well earned, and worth every last waking hour. It's hard to give up what we were to pursue. It's hard to give up who we were in order to pursue something we aren't exactly sure that we even are yet. But I couldn't wait to begin the life I wanted to lead. A life of purpose, not on somebody else's schedule, playing for the entertainment of others, but a life of joy and humility and compassion. Sometimes I regret my choice. I worry that maybe I took an easy exit, so I never had to come to terms with the possibility that I failed to move upward. But I know who I am now, and I am not governed by the hope of what could be and what once was. Somewhere in that uncertainty is the peace that regardless of where I end up, I am the same man, capable of the same things, unwavering and unchanging in the pursuit of being the ears for the voice of those who have been silenced.